well known in intelligence agencies and who also famous card and getting, I'm not bragging, I'm a lot, did by, and then separately we were contacted by one of the most famous astronauts ever. And it's not Buzz Aldrin who's been on the show. It's not some of the other people. It's a very famous astronaut from the old space program and the newer space program. I'll leave it at that. And let's just say this. I've entered the Twilight Zone. There I was flying back from Rome yesterday on a Dreamliner. And the windows have chemicals in them where you can lighten them or darken them. And they have this beautiful blue when they're dark. And then you can hit the button and lighten it. And I was up at 33,000 feet looking at Mars. And just realized, just thinking, they want to come on. And I was just thinking about how fantastical reality is. By the way, that astronaut's coming on tomorrow. Did I mention that? They want to come on. Minute one, so when I looked up on the parking lot on the show, he wants to come on and talk about something big, but doesn't want to talk about it till he's on the show. And it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder by the moment. But I guess when you open up to the universe and open up like the situation there, collapsing Africa, and I learned that he'd been in town and had reached out to see if we could meet. And then of course, he's left Austin now, so we called him. He's on the show with us today, and I hope we can get him on in the future via Skype or in studio. But Dr. Musgrave, thank you so much for coming on the broadcast with us.
You're welcome, sir. And my biggest accomplishment is standing right here to talk to you, and that's my daughter, Little Story Musgrave.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
And she's 9 years old, and I'm gonna let her go now. She's gonna go back to the tractors, so she'll be.
Hi.
Awesome. Listen, I've done my little intro. We're flat.
I'm not sure what I know. I just been to your site and stuff. That's all.
Well, it's good to have you on the broadcast.
I haven't heard the program. So, are you mostly an Austin audience?
Sure. Well, you were telling me you'd seen some of the videos online and stuff, but I was just curious about. I'm just flattered that you reached out to us. We're honored to have you.
So, are you mostly an Austin audience?
We're all over the place.
Oh, it reaches further?
Yes, sir.
Well, I love Austin, man. Austin's a going town. Austin's everything. Austin's the future. So they got the high tech, the beautiful geography, the beautiful people, the great ambiance. You know, it's the future. And so I got two kids that live there, too.
Well, that's why we've got you on. You're somebody that can tell us about the future. Where do you want to start?
About the future?
Yes. Where would you? I mean, there's so much to discuss.
Well, there's some complicated things, and that's complexity is arising. I know your audience can handle it. The complexity on Mother Earth is arising. And the complexity, of course, the advanced evolutionary string, which we are, in other words, biology is massively complex. It became that way. But then the silicon world, that world is becoming more and more powerful, more and more complex, and it's tighter and tighter in connections, interconnections between biology, that's us, and that world. And so you can look upon, and it's a painting I did for Intel. It kind of reflects that entire increase in complexity. But for starts, that's one way the world's going.
What, summing up NASA, where do you...
There's no even have what's called project management, which will make it happen. That's what it gets down to, not just for NASA, for every institution, every...
What was your favorite mission?
And it's the most notable NASA's ever flown. The passion guarantees you...
Why do
you fly in that story, Musgrave? Birth, who was the world's leading...
Correct. That, of course...
in the game.
Wow, I mean, you've been on all five. That, of course, wasn't it originally the space shuttle designed or a simpler version by Wernher von Braun, or is that incorrect?
He designed a lot of stuff, sir. Werner von Braun, who I knew very, very well. I met him, by the way. I flew the airplane by his window. He saw there's someone different flying that airplane. He called the field up and asked who flying that story, Musgrave. Can you join me for lunch? From that day forward, whenever he saw an airplane flying that way, I had lunch with him. I knew him very well. But that's a guy, Alex, who read science fiction. So he believed. He believed from a teenager. He went to Herman Oberth, who was the world's leading rocket expert at the time. He went as a teenager to that man to learn space flying, to learn rocketry. And he did it as a teenager. Then, of course, he progressed through life. He got a PhD in physics. He became a rocket person. And unfortunately, his country at the time, Germany, his country at the time, wanted him to drop B-2s on London. So serving his country, he did that. Not good, and he didn't like doing that. But he came to this country, and away you go. But the man was science fiction. The man was a dreamer. The man was one of the greatest visionaries we had. The man was incredibly close to Walt Disney and that kind of thing. And so there you had it. You had a great visionary.
Sure. I mean, didn't he pretty much invent cruise missiles, you name it? He came up with the idea for the circular cities in space, the space shuttle.
He did that. He had endless visions. He had endless visions for space flight. So the one you mentioned, maybe he had that vision too. So he had space stations. He had Mars. He had all those visions. But we let him go after we got to the moon. The very year we landed on the moon, we let him go. And so we let go, really, the best visionary we had.
How is it that they can't recreate now, they're saying, the Saturn rockets, and we have to use Russian heavy lifters to...
You got to...
I mean, culturally, my view of what's happening.
To get the Congress... same speed. Hey, what are we talking about?
Brag, but it says here, just in mainline literature, that you were in. It is deliberate. It's at every level.
Telescope you can see
that we didn't
have the money allocated for. NASA simply stands up and salutes.
I reckon with the most see what humans can envision in the middle of this universe. Musgrave discussion we about
in yourself. Now, what I teach kids is, and I'm massively optimistic for kids. I teach them it's one step in the
time,
and that becomes magical. And
astronaut, we've read the quote before. He was on the moon looking worldwide.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm not a pessimist, but that stuff did. The cloud
seems so petty.
Picture.
The Dominican.
It was 85. It wasn't a human that took that first picture.
Sure, I mean,
there's 50 wars building them up.
How ridiculous all this is.
He was considered to be a science fiction right now. See it as Sagan. We get to get 1,000 nuclear bombs. We can then getting in balance with each other, taking care of each other, loving themselves, and that's human to human and human to every other creature, insect, and plant there is. Sustainable behavior is the other thing. But we get together and we do a sustainable behavior, and we look after this little spaceship that we have.
And I agree with all that. The problem is some of these corporate interests use all of our goodwill. The sustainability they're setting up doesn't even help the planet. It just gives them more control. I mean, take genetic engineering. It's got a lot of positive things. I mean, you're a medical doctor, you know that. But if you look at the real studies, they're doing it haphazard. It's also got a lot of bad effects, just like a nuclear reactor can be good or bad. And they just don't seem to care. And quite frankly, I don't see us as a species making it much longer. Whether Atlantis was real or not, we'll basically destroy ourselves
and so
have a catastrophic event that knocks us back into the Stone Age.
Yeah, and so, but we're not responding to all the signs. And so it gets down to what socio-political system do we need to have amongst ourselves to manage the globe. And I think, one way to do it is for all of us to buy into a socio-political entity that will be the leader of all countries. The UN was born to help in that regard, but you know what I mean? The UN's been kicked around so bad I don't even want to use that term. But if all countries could buy into a socio-political enterprise, which would be the leader of the world, and then you build a socio-political system in which people get along and they constructively build civilizations and sustainable behavior. So I guess what the question you're raising is, what is the correct socio-political system to get that job done? So we've gotten rather complicated here, but I know the Austin community can understand.
Sure, and folks all over the world. Well, I want to be specific. If you look at the Rockefellers, if you look at others setting up the League of Nations, setting up the UN, they sold the idea as a League of Nations keeping their sovereignty and freedom but working together. That is a wonderful goal. We obviously need to do that, especially now with nuclear weapons. Great point. The problem is it's been hijacked by multinational corporations that are completely cutthroat, that are monopolistic, and who are cheating, selling weapons while they claim they're trying.
Anywhere.
And
it goes from grief to
bailout money to
rings. But let's just talk offline. Short-term, support the team. Support us. Anytime you give them anything you want.
Be back up for part 2.
I was driving out.
Bye-bye story.